City of Stevens Point redevelopment meeting, recorded February 20th, 2024.
I will call the Redevelopment Authority to order. Director will take the roll.
Sure. Schleiss?
Here.
Gardner's excused. Kneebone?
Here.
Cooper is excused. Kemeter?
Here.
Laddick?
Here.
Barrett?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Good. Number 2, persons who wish to address the board on a specific agenda item other than a public hearing must register their request at this time. Those who wish to address the board during a public hearing are not required to identify themselves until the public hearing is declared open by the chairperson. We have no public hearings on the agenda. Anybody register?
No, but I would make a note that due to some recent events, we are not taking public testimony on Zoom any further.
So noted. Next up, election of officers. Chairperson, vice chairperson, director.
Fairly straightforward. This is the first meeting that we have of 2024, so annually we do need to re-elect our chairperson, our vice chairperson. Mr. Schleiss has been the chair for a number of years, and Mr. Gardner has also served as the vice chairperson for a number of years. City staff would recommend approval of their reappointment.
I'll make a motion to
I'll second it.
reappointment for Schleiss and Gardner,
We've
respectively.
got a motion, we've got a second. Any other nominations? If not, I'll declare the nominations closed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Elections are finished. Thank you, I think. Number 3, approval of minutes from November 14, 2003 Redevelopment Authority meeting.
Those meetings are not, meeting minutes are not totally complete yet, and so this item has been removed from the agenda.
Alrighty. Number 4, approval of the financial reports from the Housing Trust Fund, October, November, and December.
In your packet is the bank statements for the Housing Trust Fund. You will notice a fairly sizable transfer, about $58,000 from the Housing Trust Fund into CD. Again, just trying to make some additional interest on those dollars, so that was transferred into one of our investment funds. Currently sits about $256,000 in the books at the end of 2023. 2024 opened with just about the same amount. So.
I move that we accept the financial reports and place them on file.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Jim, any discussion? All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Number 5, third amendment of development agreement, Opera House LLC, City of Stevens Point, and RDA of Stevens Point. Director.
Thank you, Chair. So before you this afternoon is a request from the Opera House. This is the group that's redeveloping the Fox Theater. They have historically had a, well, they've been working on that project for quite some time, quite frankly. And it has been making progress. In fact, the front of the building, the facade is reopened. The sidewalk is reopened to the public. And it's actually, the exterior is looking exceptionally nice, actually more original than when it was the Fox Theater to the original 1898 facade. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, I would strongly recommend you drive down Main Street and take a look. Technically, their development agreement required that they complete the project by December 1 of 2023. They knew about September, November that they weren't going to hit that mark. And so they did ask for an extension. City staff really had no problems because they have made some pretty significant improvements to the property, and they continue to work on it. They have asked for an extension to December 1st of 2024. They are confident that they will meet that specific deadline. The City Council did approve it as well, and so they've recommended approval, and staff recommends approval as well. Part of the reason this is just before you is really isn't in the city's best interest to take this property back. As you folks might recall, the Redevelopment Authority is a party to this agreement because we owned a small sliver of land in the back of the property that they ended up taking over. And so because of the improvements that they've made, I would recommend approval as presented. More than happy to answer any questions you folks might have.
I'll make a motion for approval to extend the development agreement for Opera House LLC to December 1st, 2024.
We got a motion to extend the agreement by Dave.
I'll second it.
Gene, second. Discussion? Do a voice, or you want a roll call? That's the agreement. Director will take the roll.
Schleiss.
Aye.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Kemeter.
Aye.
Laddick.
Aye.
Barron.
Aye.
5-0.
Motion carries. Number 6, request for an after-the-fact neighbor helping neighbor grant reimbursement. Director.
The individual who is making this request will be here around 3 o'clock, so I would ask the chair to relocate this to the end of the agenda.
Alrighty, we will do that. Number 7, potential changes to neighbor helping neighbor grant program.
Thank you. So Mark Cordes and Chris Claysmith from the Community Development Office are here. These are the two that manage the Neighbor Helping Neighbor Grant Program. They'll give a brief overview of the request and part of the reason, and then kick it back to you folks for any questions that you might have. So whomever wants to take that.
After the last meeting in which the Cody Williams, after the fact, Neighbor Helping Neighbor Grant came in, there was a request from the Redevelopment Authority to go back and reevaluate the program, look at including some additional items. When the Neighbor Helping Neighbor Grant was originally created, it was for kind of a curb appeal for people in low to moderate income. So one of the directives from the authority was to look at either after-the-fact approvals and then possibly include some habitability issues, because what Cody was dealing with was an unfinished bathroom in his dwelling that he was looking for money to complete. That was kind of the last step for him to move into that property. And as by happenstance, that following week, I actually had somebody else that had contacted me. Similar situation. She's living in an apartment, just as Cody was, bought a house on Prairie Street, and had done significant rehab work on the interior of that, about $10,000 worth. She was unaware of the grant programs within the city, and she would qualify for those grant programs, but she still has exterior projects to do, windows and doors and things like that, so she will be able to access the program. But again, the timing was interesting in that was the week following the Cody Williams approval. So what I had proposed is that we include interior projects if they relate to habitability. And habitability is spelled out in 2 different codes. It's in Chapter 21, which is the Property Maintenance Code, and then Chapter 30 of the Building Code. So something like air conditioning would not be included because that's not considered a habitability issue. But hot water, furnace, things like that, a collapsed sewer line, these are things we see, I would say not all the time, but once or twice a year where people are low to moderate income, they have an emergency furnace replacement, hot water replacement, a damaged water lateral or sewer lateral that needs replacement. Those projects would then qualify under the same standards for income as well as dollar amounts. So how the Neighbor Helping Neighbor Grant is set up, the first $2,500 is just $2,500 grant that they get. The second $2,500 requires a dollar-for-dollar match. So if the project is $7,500 or more, they tap out at that $5,000 max, but they have to put $2,500 into it. No changes with that, but the project type would change. Then if there's a desire, rather than having to go to the committee to review an after-the-fact application, we could extend that out. The grants are good for 12 months. We could do a 12-month look back, but I'm open to suggestions on that. That's what I'd put in there just based on the current grant guidelines of being 12 months. So with that, I have a few other items, but I think let's focus on those first before we get to the second items because they're slightly different in nature. So if there's questions, I'll take those now or comments.
Commissioners, any questions, comments? Apparently not. Continue.
Okay. So the other item was when we created the Neighbor Helping Neighbor Grant, we looked at the assessed value, which was 4 or 5 years ago, and we looked at $170,000 as kind of the cutoff for qualification within the program. And that was roughly 120-ish% of the median dwelling value. But now we've had a reassessment. Everybody's property values have went up. Rather than have to come back to this authority and ask for this dollar amount to be adjusted, we just want it to be a straight 120% of the median dwelling value. That's of the dwelling only, not the dwelling in the lot. So that's what we'd be looking at. At 120%, currently we'd be at almost $202,000 for the dwelling only for qualification under this program. And then the last change to consider, this is something just came up on an annual basis, or once or twice a year, I drive through all the city of Stevens Point, and we send out property orders based on condition of property, siding, roofing, things like that. And this year, there was a number of garages within alleyways that have been kind of getting past their useful life. So many of these property owners are deciding to take these down, and rather than rebuild them or rehab them or paint or whatever they want to do with those properties. So a question came up, and it's not really clear in the Neighbor Helping Neighbor grant whether construction, it's exterior projects, but it's not really clear if an accessory unit, like a garage or a shed, would qualify. And then secondarily, would the expense of demolition qualify? Those are just questions I'm asking. And here's one thing I get as far as code enforcement. I get a lot of complaints about clutter. Clutter means, lawnmowers, snow blowers, bikes, things like that sitting outside. So if a property doesn't have a garage, they're generally more likely to get a complaint that there's clutter from the neighbors out there. So it's something to consider. I don't have a strong feeling one way or another on this. I'm not going to advocate one way or another, but I will say that just general clutter is a complaint we get regularly from neighbors, and at least allowing them the option or offsetting some of those costs, again, if they meet that criteria, to reconstruct or construct an accessory unit garage. If one, the caveat I put in there is if one doesn't exist on the property. So if one doesn't exist, they would qualify under this program, or if they demolish what they have, then they would qualify. And then the question being, do we want to cover under the grant part of that demolition cost? That's everything in the memo. So now, again, questions that anybody has related to any of these items and changes to this grant program.
That would not cover any accessory building where somebody could inhabit the
No.
building? No. Okay. I know some of that's going around. Commissioners, questions?
I have a question. I grew up on the east side of Madison. We never had a garage. When I got old enough, it was my job to scrape all the cars in the driveway, get the snow off. I can't see supporting a garage. I could see supporting a shed if it would be appropriate for the amount of clutter around the property, if that would help clean it up. But I don't think we should be putting garages. I think the point is to make the premises habitable. But I could see a shed, and if nothing else, maybe allow a grant for the demolition of an eyesore structure, but not necessarily to replace it unless they really want to, if it's a shed. That's my only thing. I think garages, that's a pretty big ask for this program, I think.
I think you're right on the money. When I was working with state and federal funds for the housing rehab program, for years, no outbuildings. We need to put the money in to the place where the people are living, right? And so it turns into a very slippery slope when we start allowing accessory buildings when someone might need a roof. That was what it always came down to. And because the funding was cyclical, if we used it up on somebody's garage, it didn't look very good when someone didn't have a roof. So I do think that it would be appropriate to consider the cost of demo, though, for blight. I think that's a great idea.
And Maria just brought up to me, we did have a lady in yesterday, I think it was. That was in response to one order I'd sent out. She's on fixed income, and she does have to take the garage down because she had somebody look at it, and there's just no way she can do anything with the garage. It's well past its useful life, and I mean, she left in tears. So that's her situation, and that's, I would say out of the orders I sent out, I think there's about a half a dozen that related to garages, and I would say half of those are probably coming down, and many of those people would probably qualify under this grant, and most of those are significant eyesores in the neighborhoods.
I agree with both Commissioner Kneebone and Barrett. That's the way you should proceed.
Okay, why don't you put something together in language and then bring it back for our next meeting?
Anything on the first items related to interior projects or after the fact reviews? Any feedback, comments, thoughts?
Do you think 12 months is a little too long for an after-the-fact application? I mean, I could see 6. Or That one worries me a little, but not that much. I could be convinced either way.
I agree. 12 months is a long time. 6 should be adequate.
Okay.
Consensus?
I'm not worried about the 6 either, because if they're going to put the money into their house, it's not like, you know, they're going to go buy a jet ski with the refund, put it into the house, right? So.
I just would think, you know, the length of the thing might include the 12 months for the year, because a lot of times people aren't aware of the programs, you know, and it's hard to reinvigorate them to find out about them, you know.
Yeah, with the 2 cases, the Cody Williams and then the lady that had contacted me the week after, you know, they live in apartments, and I don't even think, I think she lives in Plover actually, and she bought a house in Point, so there's almost no way we can reach those people. We do direct mailing. You know, we do a press release once or twice a year, and that usually generates a fair amount of activity, and we'll be doing one this spring. And Chris will get into that, and I think we're going to do something with the contractors to help them understand these programs better. But we are doing as much as we can. We do see a significant increase when we do a press release and things like that, that people are aware of this. But some of these people that are in apartments buying their first house aren't aware that there's anything available, or certainly not through the city.
Other questions, comments, additions you'd like to see? I think the 12 months would be sufficient, because sometimes trying to find a contractor may take you a while too before you can get your cost in line and come in. So either way, I don't have a problem at 12.
And we can finalize that at the next meeting.
Sure.
I'll just revise the grant form, we'll bring it back, you can look at it, and if we need to make some final tweaks before it's finalized, we can do that. I'll take this input and modify our existing program criteria in the grant application.
I don't know. Is your applicant here for the?
Yes.
Okay.
I have never seen her in person, so she is here.
Welcome. All righty, then we'll move back to number 6. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't think we need any actual action on there, just bring it back.
Okay.
Number 6, request for an after-the-fact helping neighbor grant reimbursement. Director.
Thank you. So in your agenda packet is a memo from Mr. Cordes outlining the request from Maria Johnson, who resides at the property at 2156 Elk Street. A review after the fact for the Neighbor Grant for a roof replacement. As Mr. Cordes noted, the project was completed in July of 2023. She was working with the department in May that there was a leaky roof, that there was a basic eligibility determination, but no application was submitted. She did work with Phelps Construction, who is one of our main contractors for these types of programming. And essentially, the project was completed in July. Because she does meet the qualifications and did reach out to us, we do recommend approval of this for after the fact. The applicant is here as well and can answer any questions you folks might have as well.
Commissioners? Any issues? Motion? Gene?
I move that we accept the after-the-fact application.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Did they do a good job?
They did an excellent job. They were so professional and quick and late. There was no cleanup in the yard after they left. It was, I love it.
Very good.
Let's see, number 8, request to update housing modernization loan program eligibility criteria. Director.
I'll kick this one over to Economic Development Specialist Chris Claysmith to give you an outline of his request before you.
Thanks, Director. Just 2 simple requests and changes to the program as we continue to see changes in property values, as we did with the citywide revaluation of properties over the past year. We want to be more in line with what our median value of property is as those values change. So that, as well as time moves on, don't want to have to bring a request to you all to change the eligibility criteria based on the age of the dwelling either. So we've just made 2 simple recommendations or edits within the Housing Modernization Loan Program to state that any home older than 30 years and underneath 150% of the median home value. That way the property values change over time and we can respond quickly in updating the program. Be very responsive to our community members.
Commissioners, questions?
I think the only thing I would add to Chris's comments is that, that it is the intention of the city to do a reval every 2 to 3 years. Obviously, with the housing market the way it is, the pricing that continues to go up, we experienced it in 2017 and we experienced it in 2023, where the assessed values significantly increase, and that does place a burden on a number of property owners. As opposed to if we do a reval every few years, it at least makes those increases of potential property taxes more palatable, as opposed to significant increases every 6 or 7 years, or in the case of 2017, almost 20 years before we did the reval. Yeah. So, I think what's proposed here is pretty good and pretty consistent with kind of the policy plan that this department is moving forward with as it relates to the assessment and doing revaluations more regularly.
I have a question.
Dave.
So can you explain a little bit about the 150% less than the median value?
No, 150% of.
Of. Oh, okay, good. All right. Okay, I agree with that.
Apologies.
Okay.
Other question, Gene?
The, under the terms, there's a title review by paid to McDonald Title Company. Is that limiting? Are they the only title company now in town?
No, we are, McDonald Title is our preferred title company.
Okay.
They do a lot of work for us, and they give us some pretty significant discounts because of the amount of work that we do with them.
Yeah. Okay.
And they arguably also understand our process significantly better than a number of other title companies. So, yeah.
Other questions?
Need a motion on this? I'll make a motion to update the Housing Modernization Loan Program eligibility criteria as presented.
A motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Jim, second. Discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 9, request to evaluate and consider approval of rental improvement program. Director.
I will kick this one back over to Chris as well, as he's the one who's been managing the specific creation of this program.
Thank you, sir. As this body might recall, in 2017, the city adopted or approved a housing study, and it had specific recommendations for housing support programs for the community. And most recently, the city did conclude a housing task force with a white paper report that was delivered with a few recommendations. And during that process of creating that report, that body heard a lot of testimony from renters within the community too. And so the desire to improve our rental stock in the city of Stevens Point was also was made a lot of them clear during that process. And so we know that recommendation from the 2017 housing report still was requested by residents. And so Mark Cordes, our neighborhood improvement coordinator, and I put our heads together evaluating other rental improvement programs that exist in municipalities around the state and around the region to put together what's before you. We're recommending the construction or establishment of a rental improvement program that accomplishes a few, I would say, key targets. We want to improve or maximize the amount of improved properties that we can. We want to reward landlords who are investing in their properties and treating them well and have minimal code enforcement issues with the city, so we're rewarding good landlord behavior, and as well as trying to establish or increase access to rental units for those who might need them. So in the program as listed, we have a recommendation to review applications based on several different criteria. We have a scoring rubric on that second page of the program to illustrate how how applications are scored, so we can review them objectively and have them compete against each other for the funding that's available to improve our rental stock. You'll see quite specifically, we are rewarding behavior of matching of funds, minimal impact to monthly rent in the community and through their improvements, number of units improved, the frequency that they come back to utilize the program, at least one tenant access improvement. Those are all listed within the application, but those three possibilities include reserving units for Section 8 recipients, rent-ready participants, and/or the owner agrees to freeze the rent for the duration of the loan, which is set at 5 years. They are being good stewards of that property and ensuring that they can reinvest into that property. And then they have a history of property improvements in the city of Stevens Point, and then a minimal history of property violations for properties they do own. So we wanted to open this up for a conversation with you all on the initial design of the program. Have discussed this with a few other municipalities and their programs. City of Milwaukee has a quite robust program that they were really courteous to walk us through. And it kind of poke some holes in our original design. So with that, I would love to open this up to conversation with you all. And if there are any changes that might need to be made before any sort of approval, I'd be happy to make those changes.
Commissioners, comments, questions?
Is the standard 30 years of age with a lot of these programs? Because I noticed that in the modernization program too.
Yeah, so we're setting our standard at 30 years because that's usually a good time for us to consider the age of replacement for certain things. In the housing modernization loan, we're looking at specifically roofs, utility systems, and things like that, that as technology advances, those systems become more efficient, and we should be replacing them and helping encourage more sustainable use of our structures. Within this program, it's a little bit different in terms of rationale. We're hoping to encourage more frequent updating of properties in utilizing a tool that helps maintain the rental rate where it's at, rather than maybe exceeding borrowing limits and placing additional financial stress on tenants.
I guess I have a slight issue with this. I mean, there's a lot of rental houses that do need fixing up, and there's a lot of rental houses that the people have not put a nickel in for years, and they just been running it out. However, I have a concern with using taxpayers' money to subsidize income-producing property, particularly where this program is not having any income limits on the owners, any asset owners. They may have the wherewithal to continue to do the stuff on their own without us giving them a low percentage loan to fix their stuff up. I agree with, freezing the rent for the term of the loan and have a 2-year look back so they didn't jack it up before they come over and look for these type of things. But I really have a concern using taxpayer money, like I said, for private enterprise. If it's a duplex or something, I wouldn't have an issue. But that, again, probably would qualify for a regular residential loan, but I really can't support this program in its current usage because there are no restrictions on who can use it. And I think where better use is to use it on owner-occupied. I'd rather see our funds going that way, but that's my opinion. Other questions, comments?
I have the same feelings that you do, Chair.
Pardon?
I have the same feelings you do. So,
Would you like to just put it on file, huh? I really think we need to work better with the residents before we start getting into income producing.
So if I may, just a few things.
yeah.
If that's okay. Because I had a lot of the same concerns as this body had when this was first brought to my attention, but I think there's a few things that we have going for it, right? The housing stock that exists, even though it's income-producing property, even if the city were to put in a little bit of money towards improving that housing stock, that's better for the tenants. It's better for the long-term viability of that housing stock that desperately needs it. And it guarantees affordable housing, for the 5-year term. Those are the only two I think, big things that maybe we want to look at a little bit further. I'm not totally disagreeing that having income-producing properties eligible for a taxpayer subsidy via a low-interest loan is something we want to necessarily consider, but with the address that, there's an income, rental restriction and the amount that you can rent it for, and it continues to at least provide some type of updated housing stock to our renters is something I do want the body to at least look at or consider. But it's totally up to you folks.
I guess, go ahead, Mayor.
I will also say I have some of those same concerns about people that really could do it on their own, thinking, "Ooh, I'll just come in and take advantage of the city." It will improve the tax base because it'll improve the value of the property, might make things more livable for the people who live there. If anything, and I think it's probably not a bad idea in theory to do something like this because the goal is to make housing livable for people. I might tend to put way more weight on their own dollar investment. If they're willing to come in at 100% match, that might be worth 5 points instead of 3, to weed out folks that aren't willing perhaps to invest as much as of their own money as they should. That might help limit unscrupulous people from applying. I'm not sure, but maybe do something like that, weight the self-investment and the match money a little bit higher.
Alder Nebone, if I may ask a question in response to that. We also have the criteria of history of property improvements. Would you consider that to be also evidence of, I would say, less scrupulous behavior, more reinvestment from the property owner as well? That's another
yeah,
category.
I would say like in the past 5 years, owner has invested in improvements. I would give that 50,000 or more, maybe 4 points or 5 points. Again, the higher their level of investment, the more points I would put on that particular item, because that might help.
Well, I think the big question is what type of improvements do they put in? I mean, if their furnace went out, they have to replace that furnace. Does that really give them extra points? I don't know. A number of these things that they're doing is not really going to raise the value of that property. I mean, a lot of it, when you go through the assessment process, don't, because it's not inspected. They're all done, by computer with the assessments right now. So I would say send the program back for further review, but it's need to come back in a lot different shape than what you brought it in this time. It's a good first try, but we really don't want to go and add taxpayer money where it isn't, because after 5 years, they can jack those rents up and everything else if they did it, but they've got to put a lot more money into their own property. And I know there's a number of them over the years, and I know personally that had tons of property, but they didn't put a nickel in. They just ran it down until the students refused, or the students' parents that lived there before refused to let them to go in. And that's why we got a lot of apartment houses being built around the community, is because the parents don't want them in these so-called dumps, and unless we can get in there and, force them to fix it up to begin with.
I appreciate the sentiment and the concern, I really do. Another reason why Mark and I believe this program is maybe a little more necessary now is because of that rental property. It might have shifted ownership at this point, and the owner who had taken out the value of that is no longer on the hook for the replacement of it. And so we do have some new landlords in the area who are trying to commit to refurbishing those spaces, and they have been investing finances into doing it, and now they're at the point where they're needing to borrow more potentially to bring them up to a higher quality for our rental population, and that is going to lead to higher rental costs. And so it's another reason why we're interested in pursuing this program.
I think it's the give to get, right? So maybe we need to look at a longer term of freezing that rent or making it more accessible to Section 8 or something more that they have to give, right, to get this, so that we get our investment back. And I like the idea of weighting things more heavily towards those who put skin in the game. You know, they're not just in it for the easy money, the quick buck. They're actually investing more fully. But something else that keeps them in check a little bit longer. So maybe looking at a longer term for freezing that increases.
Yeah, and I would also add that, I mean, somebody who's on an income-producing property for 30 years shouldn't be eligible for this type of a program, right? This would be somebody who's recently acquired the parcel, wants to make the improvements, is willing to commit to a lower rent.
Just doesn't have that capital to do it.
Well, then we should also look at that as have a minimum level of either income assets or something as to be part of the program, so that if they got it, they have the ability to continue making improvements to the property and making the payments. You might get somebody that, gee, I want to get into the rental business, and I wound up with a great deal, and I don't have any money to fix it up. So, I mean, there's got to be something on both ends, a maximum on what they have. I mean, if they got, if you got the Saramores of the world, they can, buy and sell the whole town except Dave, but.
Thanks, John. I have
Dave,
a
go ahead.
question. Would there be a priority for people who live in Stevens Point that are landlords instead of getting somebody from Milwaukee that has an LLC set up?
Good point, yes.
So I'd rather help the people who live here in the area that are landlords rather than somebody who's 150 miles away.
Or an investment corporation.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
They could come in and say, oh, perfect.
Yeah.
This is quite a loan.
Any other ideas to send back? Go ahead.
Just one quick thing. Chris and I had met with several of the landlords in Stevens Point to discuss this program. And so over the last few years, we've had a number of landlords reach out to us, say, this would be really nice if we had something like this. And I'm not going to classify one or the other, but these are generally our better landlords that have made investments in their property. It's not the landlords. And we had the equal concern. There's certain landlords that would be problematic working with, and how is that money going to be used? Is it going to be taken advantage of, or are they going to take advantage of the program? Which anytime you're administering a program like this is something you want to consider. Perhaps I think what would be good, there was a landlord that met with us, and I think she's a great example in that she got letters of references actually from all of her neighbors. She did a significant improvement on one of her properties, exterior project, but she's kind of tapped out right now. She can't borrow any more money on that property, and she's very interested in this. She wants to do more interior work. So she can get letters of reference from her neighbors and her tenants, and perhaps if she came here and talked to you as the redevelopment authority, that she could share her story and how she would use that funding. Then you can see how it's actually being used, what she's done with her properties and the hurdles she's run into now, as well with interest rates being high. On a commercial property, you're looking at about 8% right now if you're borrowing. So you can borrow at 2%. Something they're looking at pushing off, or if you're getting near your maximum because she's done significant exterior projects, siding, windows, things like that, roofing on this property, and wants to do some interior work. I think that's a great example, but if she can tell her own story, maybe that would resonate with you and see how it would be used within the community to better that property. I think a lot of times we look at residents, we just look at homeowners, but renters are just as much residents of this community as homeowners are. So we're hoping to, this project or this loan program was hoping to better their living circumstances. And you hit it perfectly, Jim. You give a little bit to get a little bit. So that's what we're kind of trying to hit that balance.
Until we get a program actually put together with a number of the things here, it's real hard. Yeah, we can bring in a whole bunch of people here and cry a river how this is really going to help them and blah, 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 and I don't have any money. But until we get a program that we can work with, I don't know how we could even look at that. I mean, I would say bring it back to the drawing board, and we don't say no, but we're not saying yes at this point. Dave?
I have one other concern. I don't think 80,000 here is going to do enough. I think if you put this in place, you're going to have so many applications for this money that 80,000 isn't going to go very far, and you're going to have to turn a lot of people down. So I think we're going to do this. We need to put a lot more money into this program.
So we'll take the comments back and make some adjustments and bring this back at a future meeting.
Sounds good. Number 10, report on the 2023 program usage.
So I did think it was important, a little backstory, when I started with the city and the redevelopment authority, there was a lot of conversation of, well, we have all this money in the housing trust fund, but we aren't doing anything with it. You know, we had some grant programs that were existing, but they weren't well utilized. And so I did think it was important for you folks to at least understand what 2023 looked like as really the first full year of a number of our programs that are managed through the redevelopment authority looks like out into the community. So I asked Chris to put together just a quick overview. So you can see that there were 4 modernization loans made, and that was a program that just really took off this last year. 13 Neighbor Helping Neighbor grant programs. 1 multifamily rental conversion grant was awarded that took a property that was a multifamily, a duplex, and turned it back into a single-family home. Not too surprising, we had no residential demolition grants. That seems to be, was structured to be a more popular grant program pre-2018 when the housing market really took off. But now that housing prices are significantly higher than they were when that grant program was initially created, the likelihood of somebody using that with the idea that they would buy a $200,000 lot on the city's north side, tear that house down and build something new seems to be less and less likely. And we actually, in my time with the city, haven't had that specific grant ever utilized. But of all these, we only had 2 applicants that decided not to pursue because of dissatisfaction with our design of the programs. One, most notably, was for a conversion grant. They had some major concerns about the deed restrictions that we have required as part of that grant program itself. And quite frankly, city staff and this body actually heard that case, the College Avenue house, that, you know, didn't make sense for us to award this money without any guarantee that it would stay a single-family home. So with that, I just thought it was really important that you folks have the opportunity to review this, and, you know, I'm happy to answer any questions you folks might have. Otherwise, again, Chris and Mark are the ones who are really the ones implementing this program. They can provide any other answers you might have as well.
Commissioners, any questions, comments? Not, we'll move right on. Executive Director, the report.
There's a few items I did want to bring to the Redevelopment Authority's attention. You folks might recall that you had approved funding for a consultant to come in and work with the work group that was created for the Community Land Trust. That program and that group is still meeting once a month with our consultant. We have a plan that's starting to really form itself in terms of, you know, what's a resale value. There's a few of us working on potential bylaws, and that we are moving forward with, you know, a number of different things when it comes to that specific community land trust. So as that continues forward, as it becomes, those plans become more solidified, we'll of course be prepared to present that to the Redevelopment Authority. Because he did make a financial investment at one point, it is important that you at least receive the kind of the fruits of that labor. And second would be, you know, of course, there's always the opportunity with some of the scattered sites this body owns that it might be in our best interest to sell those to the Community Land Trust or be a partner in the future Community Land Trust properties itself. So Shopko redevelopment, you know, we did have our meeting in January, kind of that committee of the whole, if you will. Super well received. As it relates to the physical design of the property, not a lot of significant changes there. We had a lot more comments on, you know, potential uses and how that would structure, but as it relates to the physical layout, there wasn't a whole lot of changes that I think city staff is going to pursue. We may look at, you know, do you relocate the park space a little bit? Do you do some minor things, but nothing of substantial note? So we are moving forward kind of as is, and so the next phase of that really will be looking at what the phasing costs will be for that specific property. The Redevelopment Authority does own the parking lot that Shopko sits in the middle of, quite literally. And so the City Council did authorize last night issuing an RFP for demo of that property. We'll hope to fully get that out in the next week, get some demo costs back in. We can at least take the building out and start phasing in, you know, the extension of Strong's up to Union, looking at doing some of the underground work and preparing those development sites for redevelopment. As I've said to a number of folks, that project and that redevelopment is truly a marathon, not a sprint. And so I think it's just going to be, over the next several years, we'll see a lot of activity on that specific site. Edgewater Manor, we do have an RFP out there. It's due March 12th. We have not received any proposals at this time. Not super uncommon for us not to receive anything until the week of. That's been a pretty significant trend over the last few years, mainly because when lending was when interest rates were so low, a lot of developers were actually not even responding to RFPs, but we are seeing more folks start to do that as the economy picks back up and as sites become a little bit more challenging to acquire. That will be part of what's known as a FAM tour, familiarization tour, that the city's working on for 2024 this summer. We'll bring in about 25 developers throughout the Midwest to Stevens Point in partnership with the city of Wausau. They'll spend a day in Stevens Point going through development parcels, Shopco, Municipal Lot 8, the Edgewater site, meeting with other folks in the area to see if they could do a project down here. So that will be part of it as well. Municipal lot number 8, we do have a developer that we are working on for that specific parcel. I'll hopefully have more information on that for you folks in the coming weeks. We do have a potential project there, and so I do want the body to be at least aware of what's going on there. Thank you, Mr. Barrett, reminding me that it is kind of a mess right now, so we will definitely reach out to the folks that were using it as a staging area to ensure that's cleaned up. 1101 Centerpoint Drive, this body does technically own. That's the former Great Lakes Student Loans Building, former Dunham Sports, former Stage Shop, former all sorts of different things, right?
It was staged when it was first constructed.
When it was first constructed. So as you might recall, there was a desire to see if a convention-style center could work there. We did hire a consultant out of the Chicago area who have some serious concerns about the financial viability of a convention center. So there is an internal group that is meeting this week to further discuss kind of what the next steps are. But I want to make you folks aware of it as the property owner. That's kind of what we had heard and are taking that to heart, before we do anything else as it relates to using that specific parcel for much of anything else. So. And then finally, the Downtown Targeted Area Master Plan. Many of you were involved in that first iteration in 2019, and several of you were involved in the, I'll call the revamp or 2.0 version. As you might recall, we never formally adopted that Targeted Area Master Plan, and so it was really important that we reignite that process to bring that plan to the finish line, because although it's never been formally adopted, staff believes that's really been the direction we've been going anyway. So we have been working with Vanderwall and Associates, and in the next several weeks you'll see more final drafts before you for consideration. I wouldn't say there's anything significantly changed from what was there previously, but enough where I feel comfortable at least presenting it to you folks before we formalize anything with the Common Council and adopting that as essentially that area's specific plans. So those are my updates. I'm more than happy to answer any other questions you folks might have.
Commissioners, Dave?
Okay. So the Shopco redevelopment, was that plan actually approved by the Common Council then already, or is it still need to be fine-tuned yet before it goes to Common Council?
Yeah, the fine-tuning still needs to occur before it goes to the Common Council, but we've essentially kind of started moving forward with the plan that will be eventually adopted.
Okay. But you can do the demolition prior to plan approval by the Common Council?
Yeah, and part of the reason I was comfortable doing that was, regardless of what ends up happening with that site, that building has to come down.
Okay.
And so, if it was this different situation where you might have 2 or 3 different conceptual options and you want to wait until you have a development in order to take the building down, I would probably have waited to consider demolition. But because the plan that seemingly the community is attracted to involves raising that structure, that's been the direction that we've kind of taken it.
Okay. And is there a plan to replace the parking that we're taking away? And I know there's some underground parking, but obviously that's not going to be enough.
Yeah, good question. So the area that's most utilized for parking won't be touched as part of the demolition. So that will be remaining as public parking until a development occurs there.
Right, but when a development occurs, that's going to be an issue?
There's technically a net loss within the current plan. I think it's about 150 stalls. We are adding a number of on-street parking options. So currently, or the plan is that when you drive down Main Street, you'll have that same pull-in parking that you have kind of west of Strong's.
yeah.
You would have that on the north side as you came down. So you add a number of on-street stalls on Main Street, on Church Street, and then the public parking behind those buildings. There's a net loss, but we're trying to make up for it as much as possible.
Okay, I might be able to buy something else and create a new parking lot.
Yep. Yeah, that's something we can always look at.
Okay. And parking lot number 8, that's still by Northern Distillery?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And you're thinking about eliminating that for development?
Yeah, we are hoping to get a development there as opposed to leaving it as a municipal parking lot. The challenge there, quite frankly, is that the Moses Creek
Goes underneath.
storm is underneath that lot. That's a 96-inch poured concrete culvert, so that has to be relocated. So it's been difficult for us to find a development that's big enough to justify the expense to relocate that.
Okay, where's everybody parking with the Northern Distillery? Because I went through the other day and I was like, I had a hard time finding parking at all, anywhere.
A lot of on-street parking. Some folks are also parking in the alleyway between Lot 8 and the distillery as well.
And the parking lot across
And the
the
parking
street.
lot across the street, yeah.
Have to be across the street and walk across.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that downtown zoning does not require any off-street parking. And so that's almost by design, where you have kind of a communal parking space and then you walk to your destination, whether it be the distillery or some of the shops in the downtown area.
Probably the number one complaint I hear about people going downtown.
I hear a lot about parking, yeah.
Other questions or comments for the director? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.